Hey guys, how's it going? Engeri here. The Source engine. It runs infamous games like Half-Life, Left 4 Dead, Portal, Dota 2, CSGO, and even Titanfall and Apex Legends, with the two latter running in its own branch of the Source engine. But what I really want to talk about are the mods for the Source engine. You might not realize this, but I absolutely adore modding. Not like the last 3 of my videos were related to modding, right? And I've been lucky enough to have been playing and messing around with mods for a very long time due to the fact that, well, I'm old.
Greetings.
Oh god. And I absolutely adored the amount of mods and creativity that we saw in the early 2000s to the mid 2010s when companies like Valve would openly allow modding to their engine, which resulted in a plethora of free mods that were absolutely amazing that, while being outdated today, were legendary in their time, and a fair few number of these are still worth playing to this very day. Before we move on, I want to say that this video was inspired by Goldex's video on Source Engine mods, Riot Games' video on dead games, and Redlines' videos on similar dead game topics. So do check those out if you want to hear more about dead mods. All of the above are really great content creators, so do check them out. So just really briefly, I wanted to talk about the history of the Source engine. If you don't want to hear this, just skip a bit in the video. Anyway, if you didn't know, Valve, the creators of Steam, made the Source engine as its follow-up engine to build Half-Life 2 on, which of course is the successor to the great original Half-Life game, which again ran on an engine called the Gold Source engine, which in turn is a heavily modified version of id Software's Quake engine. Anyway, Half-Life 2's release in 2004 would of course go on to become a massively successful game, and in its wake followed Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike Source, Portal, and third-party games like Engeri's Mod, the original Insurgency game, and later, funnily enough, Apex Legends and Titanfall were all released on the Source engine, although the latter two were basically released on different engines by the time they were done modifying it. So what's up with the Source engine, and what's so special about it? I mean, if we look back at other games released in the same year as Half-Life 2, such as GTA San Andreas and with its graphics, and Far Cry 1 with the way it looks, there's no doubt that the Source engine looks amazing, but what made the Source engine so successful really wasn't its texture quality. What made it groundbreaking was its physics, the facial animations, and later things like HDR is truly what blasted it off and set the standard for future games. Not to mention that Half-Life 2, as the very first game on the Source engine, had super clever level design, superb atmosphere, an interesting and captivating story, a large variety in level types, interesting enemies, and overall was really just a very well-built game that helped showcase what the Source engine could do in the right hands. And to top all of this off, the catalog of mods that were created after Half-Life 2's release really helped push the popularity of the Source engine as well. I really do think there is something to note in all this, because sure, good graphics are great and all, but good graphics on their own doesn't really add up to that much. Another game that was released a very long time ago that also had groundbreaking graphics was Crysis. And just to be clear here, I'm not saying Crysis is bad. In fact, I love Crysis. But even though Crysis had amazing graphics that really made the whole game into a meme that still lasts to this very day with the classic line, "Can it run Crysis?" the game series and the game engine never saw as broad of adoption and relevancy as the Source engine did. And sure, the Cry engine is still being developed and has some games on it, like Hunt Showdown. It's really nothing compared to that of the Source engine, and I largely believe this can be contributed to the fact that the Source engine had free developer tools, Valve made their own catalog of amazing games, and the mods for the Source engine spawned so much fan-made content that were really there was something in it for absolutely everybody. Anyways, eventually the Source engine would be phased out with the Source 2 engine introduced in 2015, which today runs Counter-Strike 2, Half-Life Alyx, Dota, and a few other games. Counter-Strike Global Offensive did run on the original Source engine, but with its port to what we now know as Counter-Strike 2, the engine was also changed. However, outside of Counter-Strike 2 and Half-Life Alyx and a few other games, nothing is really being made on any of the Source engines anymore, because it's old, and besides, like they say, Valve used to make games, and now they make money.
Modern gaming.
So, that's just a really brief history on the engines and where we are today. But the mods is, of course, what I really want to talk about and what you want to hear about. Because the Source engine and its developer tools quickly became super popular after Half-Life 2's release, mostly due to the fact that they were free to use, if the mods being created on them was free as well. If you wanted to sell a game on the Source engine, it would cost you a cool $25,000. Listing a mod on the Steam store alone apparently is $100, but don't quote me on that. So in the wake of all this, followed a whole bunch of Source engine mods that were honestly kind of fucking awesome, and I want to show some of them off, especially the ones that died out or that you might not have heard of back in the day. This list comes in absolutely no particular order, so this is not a top 10 kind of thing, and I'm putting an emphasis a little bit on the mods that you probably haven't heard about, so trying to put in the mods that other content creators really haven't covered, but that I think deserves a slot. Have you ever wanted to play Half-Life 2 but in multiplayer and or with up to 20 other retarded strangers? Yeah. Me too. The very first mod on the list is the one with perhaps the most absolute chaos. It's a mod called Synergy. And Synergy, to those of you that don't know, is a mod that lets you play Half-Life 2 in multiplayer, and that's pretty much it. It might not seem like a big deal today, but man, when this came out back in 2005, it was pretty big. Like, grab some friends and play through the entire campaign of an almost new game being Half-Life together. The chaos is just as much as you'd imagine. The netcode is similar to that of many other Source games, and it's generally just a super goofy and hilarious experience that's lots of fun, especially with friends. Synergy is definitely dead, with a monthly peak of 123 players, with an average of 42 players online back in May of 2024. However, it does still have active servers that are just as interesting as you'd expect. Being a mod released close to over 20 years ago, it's at this point completely populated by Russians, Ukrainians, Poles, and other people with no money, just like me. But hey, it's still an excellent experience. Synergy is also on Steam, it's super easy to install, and the only prerequisite is only Half-Life 2. Check it out for yourself and give it a spin, you probably won't regret it. Building on and in many ways expanding the Synergy experience is Obsidian Conflict. So what exactly is Obsidian Conflict? Well, for starters, it does have some banging tunes in the main menu. So yeah, anyway, what is Obsidian Conflict? I don't know yet, but I did just spend an hour fishing with some random dude I just met. We really didn't exchange many words, but we did have a lot of fun, and I would love to show you the footage, but for whatever reason, it just kind of looks like this. I figure it's also worth saying Obsidian Conflict isn't really all that dead. In fact, it received updates as late as June of 2023. The player base, however, isn't really that big on this one. I was playing a few hours on a Friday night in June, and not a single player came in on any of the servers that I tried, except the one time that I was playing this outside of that one night. So jokes aside, Obsidian Conflict can be best described as a co-op game based on Half-Life 2, where the real gameplay is in the huge variety of maps that the mod offers. You and a group of friends can do everything from fucking fishing. You can also, like in Synergy, play the whole Half-Life series of games, including Lost Coast, somehow, and also Half-Life Source, which is honestly kind of cool. You can do puzzles, platform, farming, and a whole lot more. I guess the real question you might be asking is how Obsidian Conflict is any different than, say, Engeri's mod. And honestly, the way I see it, it comes down to the fact that Engeri's mod is much more focused on the creative aspect of building, and its secondary big thing is being into the whole roleplay thing like Dark RP, Star Wars RP, and a few others. Not to mention, Engeri's mod does cost money, while Obsidian Conflict is also free. I did play Obsidian Conflict for quite a few hours and had to try out some of the really unique and different maps. I tried this one map where you play a linear zombie survival experience with more like Walking Dead type zombies, and the map was absolutely ginormous. I, however, didn't have Counter-Strike installed, so there were some items missing. I played this janky, interesting robot destruction map with your girl Hatsune Miku as a companion. And I also tried this other cyberspace puzzle-looking map, and I was unfortunate enough to also play someone's practical joke or something. Obsidian Conflict is a pretty heavy user of map selection worlds, and I joined an anime map selection world, which is kind of interesting. And the fact that they ran online with 0 players is pretty cool. However, a lot of these servers are based on at least 2 players playing them, but I don't have any friends, so I have to use other map selection worlds to be able to play than this anime one, unfortunately. Obsidian Conflict is still very much online. You can definitely play this and try some of these maps and experience the designs of an era that's quite frankly bygone. But don't wait around forever to try these, because with 0 players online, I'm quite frankly surprised these servers are still up at all. If you want to experience Obsidian Conflict, or if you're an old-time player, I'd say now is the time to go try it out while it's still around. Oh yeah, and as a bizarre final note on Obsidian Conflict, if you're in the map selection server called Winter 2012, if you look up and outside, you'll be met with this. It's not easy to spot at first, but yeah, that's the World Trade Center. Huh. Next up is Source Forts, released in 2005. Source Forts is a capture the flag mod where the twist is all about the physics of the source engine, allowing you to create blockades using your gravity gun, which can be frozen in place, which provides a real challenge for you and your enemies attempting to capture the flag of each other. Today, it might really not seem that interesting with the huge variety of deathmatch games we have, but for its time, it was a really cool capture the flag modification with a very active player base. Source Forts features only a single game mode, where the first few minutes were spent building a fortification for yourself, keeping you and your flag safe from the enemy. You can make trenches, barricades, sky-high fortresses, or you can attack the enemy, weld your way past their blockades, and steal their flag. That's literally kind of Source Forts for you. People really went absolutely nuts with creativity in this one back in the day, and it was really cool to see some of the things that people built. It was also incredibly fast-paced and was a real challenge for new players. I remember as a kid getting absolutely shreked by the experienced players in this one. Unfortunately, today it only has 3 servers left running, and on a Friday night in June, it had 0 players online. Although I didn't stick around for that long, as you really cannot start a game on your own in this one. They do have a Discord and arranged matches every now and then, and apparently they had fixed matches for a very long time, even after the Source Forts mod lost a lot of its popularity. Next up is Zombie Master Source, which just like a lot of the other mods on this list, I played a ton as a kid. In this mod, you play either as a survivor or the Zombie Master, or the Zombie Master plays the game as more of this strategic overlord, commanding and spawning zombies, setting traps for players, and triggering events. The Zombie Master sees the world from a top-down perspective and can move their camera angle around freely while survivors are locked in first person. The Zombie Master will use all of his tools and his abilities to try and kill the players to stop them from reaching their objectives, which could be anything from like fixing a car to reaching a certain area, crossing a bridge, solving puzzles, and many more. If it wasn't obvious, Zombie Master Source holds a very near and dear place in my heart because of the fact that I played it so much as a kid. I think the most special thing with Zombie Master was the amazing amount of creativity in maps. For example, there was this pretty popular Resident Evil 1 Umbrella Hive map, there was a Tetris map, there was this desert car fix map. Others would be puzzle maps where the players had to run through a limited maze in a large horde and figure out where to step and not to step, or risk triggering traps. Kind of like what we see in popular Netflix shows today like Squid Game. Zombie Master was incredibly focused around player cooperation, and only the teams that cooperated would actually have a chance at survival. In a usual game of Zombie Master, players would all spawn together in this big crowd and would move their way through a kind of long linear map where traps were set for them, and over time, players would fall in the traps or fall out and die by their own stupidity. Over time, only leaving so many players left alive, which made it into a super tense and sometimes kind of funny experience. I also quickly want to say that due to the fact that Zombie Master Source unfortunately has 0 players left online, I'm showing you gameplay footage from back in the day instead of walking around in empty servers, and I'm just unfortunately not able to recreate what it was like back in its glory days. In fact, speaking of its glory days, Zombie Master Source is certainly not in its glory days. In fact, it's like many other of the mods on this list, completely dead outside of the rare game being hosted here and there on the Zombie Master remake, which I did play and is pretty good, but it doesn't matter that it's good when there is absolutely no players online at all. Lambda Wars is a really different and very unusual mod on the Source engine because it's a top-down RTS, similar to that of many others in the genre. When I was first playing this, I thought to myself that it was kind of impressive to make a mod in this format, given how most of the Source engine games are first-person only, but only after looking into Lambda Wars did I find out that it's in fact not a mod for Half-Life 2, but instead a mod for a game called Alien Swarm. Now, if you're anything like me, the name Alien Swarm did kind of ring a bell, but I couldn't really remember it or place it anywhere, so consider my shock when I found out that a not-so-popular game studio made Alien Swarm. Just, this small, unknown indie studio named Valve. It was Valve, the guys that made Half-Life, the Source engine, and, Steam. I'm dead serious when I say that Alien Swarm must be by far one of their most unpopular games if we're solely looking at player numbers alone. And surprisingly, it's also one of Valve's many well-liked products. Even the extremely hated and unpopular game Artifact Valve made a few years back was Not very popular, but it actually has more players than Alien Swarm. As a side note, Artifact is split between Artifact Foundry and Artifact Classic, with Foundry, at the time of writing, having an average of 4.3 players in May of 2024. Anyhow, the name Alien Swarm kind of just seems to be a little bit forgotten and hidden in Valve's game library, unlike most of its other successful content. And it's a little surprising because it's genuinely like an enjoyable product. Now, to be fair, I could only actually play the offline exercise mode for Alien Swarm due to there not being any players online at all. And the exercise mode consists only of a single mission that takes like 50 minutes to finish. I did try to join servers, but I kept getting connection fails, so it's just a no-go. Anyway, actually somehow in all of this, Lambda Wars as the mod for Alien Swarm gets more average players than the actual game Alien Swarm, which was made by Valve themselves. I think it's kind of incredible that a Valve product like Alien Swarm is as forgotten as it really is. It's a totally free game on Steam, and even its complete source code is downloadable on Valve's own website for people to play around with, but it's just a totally forgotten source engine product. Anyhow, back to Lambda Wars. In Lambda Wars, you've got full building sets as both the Combine and the Rebels. You can play this one in a PvP mode as just like any other classic RTS. You can also step back and play this in single player. And now I'll be the first to say I'm not really good at RTS games. I do love them, but I'm terrible at them, so I actually got wiped out on my first try at this one. A kind of interesting thing about Lambda Wars is that it never really had that big of a player base to begin with. The Steam release of the mod peaks out at 980 players and has a low dip of around 25 average in 2016, and today it's back to having an average of 25. I'd definitely say that Lambda Wars is forgotten, but it certainly isn't as dead as a lot of the other things on this list. Lambda Wars is completely free to play. It was released on Steam in 2014, so check it out if you want a really interesting and unique experience in the Half-Life universe, and perhaps its only RTS game. Alright, the video's been dragging on for a bit, so I just want to throw in some honorable mentions of good mods that are dead, but I'm not going to go crazy in depth here, so take it or leave it. First up, there's Double Action Boogaloo. It's a crazy, wacky source mod about jumping around and shooting like Mad Max. Sorry, old habit, I mean Max Payne. This one still gets a good few players on servers. It's genuinely a lot of goofy jumping around fun, completely free to play. Highly recommended. If you've ever played Max Payne, you'll be right at home in this one. It's free and it's on Steam. There's also Fistful of Frags, which is a super fun, goofy western shooter. I absolutely love this one, but it's not really that dead. In fact, it gets a couple hundred players on every single day. It's got horses, factions, bandits, booze, Steam Workshop integrations, the whole shebang. Really recommended. There's also the game called Contagion, and that's kind of the key point, it being a game and not a mod. Contagion is a paid game that you can buy on Steam. The reason I wanted to cover it is that it's the spiritual successor to a mod called Zombie Panic Source, which was for a very, very long time one of my absolute favorite mods on the Source engine. Contagion's got full campaigns, cool multiplayer, the gunplay is really slowed down and feels very nice for like this tactical, slower paced zombie game. It's got weapon upgrades, melees, stories, custom content all around. Speaking of Zombie Panic Source, that happens to be my final honorable mention. Zombie Panic Source is still up and running and getting a few players on the most popular servers to this very day. This is a classic Source engine zombie game where one unlucky player at the start of each round is infected and will try to kill the other players. Once you die, you respawn as a zombie and you have to try hunt the other players. There's custom guns, medical supplies, there's a weight system, you got ammo types, there's this custom panic button you can press to drop all your stuff because the game also has a weight system, and much more interesting details that made Zombie Panic a absolute favorite mod of mine. If you've ever played, for example, the zombie mode in Counter-Strike Source, you'll recognize a lot of the gameplay from this one. Alright guys, that is going to do it for this one. I absolutely loved making this piece, and just looking back at these Source Engine mods is really looking back at an era that is almost completely bygone at this point and is just slowly fading into obscurity, and eventually it will be gone, which makes me a bit sad in a way. I really loved the types of games and interactions we used to be able to have in these older games, and things are just a little bit different now, for better or for worse. I'm glad I got to enjoy the Source engine in its height and the cool people I've been fortunate enough to meet in the games that came out in the early 2000s. Finally though, I do have a question for you. Did I miss any of your favorite Source engine mods? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I read every single one that I get. If you enjoyed the video, I'd also love hearing about it or improvements that I could make. If you don't mind, please also consider giving the video a like or maybe subscribing if you want to support me a bit. You can also find my Twitch and Discord channel down below too. And with that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and bye-bye.